15-minute or less lecture series, Anatomy and Physiology, Chapter 9, Nervous System, Part 3. Moving on to the brainstem. The brainstem being the neck, belly, and tail of the seahorse. The brainstem comes in three main regions: the medulla oblongata, or tail of the seahorse, the pons, or belly of the seahorse, and the midbrain, or neck of the seahorse. The medulla oblongata transmits all impulses between the brain and spinal cord. Makes sense since it's attached to the spinal cord. Also houses nuclei that control vital, critical, visceral functions. The cardiac center for controlling the heart rate, vasomotor center for controlling blood pressure in our blood vessels, and the respiratory center that helps control the rate and depth of breathing. You have the pons. The pons transmits impulses between the brain and spinal cord as well. Also contains centers that regulate the rate and depth of breathing, and it is attached to and communicates with the cerebellum. And then the midbrain contains nerve fibers that convey impulses to and from higher parts of the brain. It is directly attached to the cerebrum and the diencephalon. And it also contains centers for auditory and visual reflexes. Auditory reflex, say something suddenly enters your field of vision, you will look toward it automatically. Visual reflexes, somebody makes a loud noise behind you, you'll automatically start to turn toward that noise. Moving on to the cerebellum, this extraregionally structure is very important in movement. It functions to integrate sensory information about the position of our body, aka equilibrium and proprioceptive information, and then uses that to make sure we are in where we're supposed to be in terms of where we are in the world around us. Also coordinates skeletal muscle activity and maintains our posture. If damage to the cerebellum can lead to what's called ataxia, which is a loss of ability to coordinate muscular movements. So basically, the person will be swinging back and forth, having trouble reaching for things that they want. Basically, sort of the physical manifestations of what it's like to be drunk, except the person isn't actually drunk. All right, so the peripheral nervous system, as we know, is made up of cranial and spinal nerves that include sensory information going to the brain and somatic and autonomic information going out to control the effectors. There are 12 cranial nerves. Cranial nerve 1, olfactory nerve, is interacting with the neurons of the olfactory epithelium to carry and transmit the sensation of smell or olfaction. It sends the axons to the ethmoid bone, as shown here. They go to the olfactory bulb. The olfactory bulb then carries that through the olfactory tract. That then carries the information to the primary olfactory area in the insula. It completely bypasses the thalamus. Thalamus not involved. Optic nerve. Optic nerves are coming from the eyeballs, carrying visual stimulation, visual information to the brain. The optic nerves right and left end up meeting at the optic chiasm near the hypothalamus, as seen here. And then they will cross over. The right half will go to one side, left half of the information goes to the other side. And then that information will be sent to the thalamus. And then from the thalamus, it'll lead to the primary visual area in the occipital lobe. If olfactory tissue is damaged, you could get anosmia, which is a loss of smell. It could be from infection, damage to cribriform plate, lesions along the olfactory pathway. With the optic nerves, you could get anopia or blindness, which can be caused from damage to the eye, missing eye, or partial or complete optic nerve damage. So you could have one eye where you can't see, both eyes. You could lose just your outer visual input or off to one side or the other side. It's very complicated, potentially. All right, you have the oculomotor nerve, cranial nerve 3, trochlear nerve, cranial nerve 4, abducens nerve, cranial nerve 6. These three control the muscles that move the eyeball. Damage to them could lead to strabismus, where the eyes don't line up with each other. One of them is kind of off a little bit, also known as a lazy eye. And you could have diplopia, where damage to a cranial nerve causes the muscle to contract a little too much, too rapidly, leading to double vision. Trigeminal nerve, cranial nerve 5. Trigeminal because it has three main branches. It helps to do many things. It has the sensory information for touch, pain, and thermal sensation in the facial area, especially the deeper structures like the bones. It helps control the muscles for chewing, such as the masseter muscle and the temporalis. and it has control some of the muscles in the tongue. Then we have the facial nerve. Facial nerve, cranial nerve 7, goes to more the superficial muscles of the facial area, also going to the tongue and nasal cavity. So sensory neurons, it carries the taste sensation for the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. Motor neurons help to control muscles in the middle ear, muscles in the face and scalp and neck. And it also has some autonomic motor neurons to control some of the glands, such as the lacrimal glands for tear fluid, nasal glands, salivary glands. Bell's palsy is when you have damage to one of the facial nerves, leading to the inability to use one half of the face's facial muscles. So this guy's trying to give you a big smile. Vestibulocochlear nerve is the nerve that carries the input for equilibrium and for hearing. If this nerve is damaged, you can suffer from vertigo, feeling that the body and or the environment is rotating. Ataxia could also be caused by damage to the transmission of the equilibrium sensations. You have tinnitus, ringing in the ear, or deafness. Glossopharyngeal nerve, cranial nerve 9. It is going to both be a sensory nerve, so it's carrying the sensory sensation of gustation from the posterior third of the tongue, also some of the sensations for the muscles for swallowing, and also sensations for chemicals in the bloodstream. It also controls some muscles, such as the stylopharyngeal muscles needed for swallowing, also controls the parotid salivary gland. Damage to it can lead to dysphagia, difficulty in swallowing, or ageusia, a loss of taste sensation. Vagus nerve is cranial nerve 10. It is the only nerve that innervates structures in the trunk of the body. It has sensory information arriving from the various visceral organs, the lungs, the heart, the liver, the stomach, etc. It allows us to detect hunger, fullness, discomfort. It has motor control, helps us in swallowing, in coughing, and vocalizing. It helps to innervate the larynx. And it has some autonomic control functions. It helps to control the rate of breathing in the lungs, beating of the heart, dilating or constricting of respiratory passageways, and basically everything going on in the gastrointestinal tract. Then we have the accessory nerve, cranial nerve 11. It controls the cleidomastoid muscles and the trapezius muscles that allow us to move our head and shoulders. Damage to this nerve can lead to paralysis of the sternocleidomastoid or trapezius muscles, making it difficult to raise the shoulders or turn the head. And then cranial nerve 12 is the hypoglossal nerve. This innervates some of the skeletal muscles of the tongue. Damage to it could lead to dysphagia or difficulty in swallowing. Peripheral nervous system. There are 31 pairs of spinal nerves. They are mixed nerves. They both have sensory information and motor information traveling through them. The sensory information is being transmitted through the dorsal root, the sensory dorsal root, to the posterior side of the spinal cord. The motor information is leaving through the anterior side through the ventral root. When they come together, you get the spinal nerve. After the spinal nerves leave the vertebral canal, they will form plexuses where they're sending little branches of axons to each other, and eventually leading to the production of specific named nerves. For instance, there is the cervical plexus found in the neck, primarily from the first few spinal nerves. Then we have the brachial plexus, primarily from cervical nerves, that will lead to the production of the named nerves of the upper limbs, such as the musculocutaneous nerve, the axillary nerve, the radial nerve, the median nerve, and the ulnar nerve, all coming from the brachial plexus. So musculocutaneous nerve, as you can see, will lead down the side, doing the more superficial structures of the arm. Axillary nerve is just in the armpit area, innervating the shoulder. Ulnar nerve ends up running along the same side as the ulna, controlling some of the muscles in the forearm and hands. Median nerve runs sort of in the middle along the arm and ends up innervating forearm muscles and muscles of the hand as well. And then we have the radial nerve also controlling the various muscles in the arm and hand. All right, then we have the intercostal nerves that are innervating structures in the thoracic portion of the body. The intercostal spinal nerves do not form plexuses. They just innervate the structures they are on level with. Then we have in the lower region, the lumbosacral plexus, receiving nerves from the lumbar region and sacral region of the spinal nerves. They form a huge plexus that ends up forming the femoral nerve, Going to the leg, the obturator nerve and the sciatic nerve. Obturator nerve is mostly for medial muscles and muscles in the gluteal region. The femoral nerve is more toward the anterior side, the upper thigh muscles, and goes down the medial side of the leg. And then the sciatic nerve, the largest nerve, innervates a lot of structures, especially in the lower leg and feet. The autonomic nervous system helps to maintain homeostasis, helps us to do activities without us having to think about it. So for tears and glands and heart and other organs of the body, it innervates the smooth muscle tissue in those organs, cardiac muscle tissue and glands, maintains homeostasis, responds to emotional stress, prepares the body for strenuous activity. Two divisions, parasympathetic division, which operates under normal restful conditions through the rest and digest system, and the sympathetic division, which operates under stress or emergency, the fight or flight responses. So they both have preganglionic axons, motor axons coming from the central nervous system. They will then synapse in a ganglion and then lead to the postganglionic neuron that will then cause the effectors to respond. Some of these utilize acetylcholine, some norepinephrine. So parasympathetic division, also known as the sacrolumbar division, because we have, sorry, that's not correct. You end up having cranial nerves carrying the sensory information for the parasympathetic division, as well as the sacral region of the spinal cord. This ganglia for these are usually near the organs or target effectors, and this leads to the rest and digest responses. Increased salivation, constriction of pupils, slowing the heart rate, slowing down rate of breathing, increased function of the gastrointestinal structures. Sympathetic division also has has what's called a pre-sympathetic front ganglion, this long structure on either side of the verbal column, where there are lots and lots of ganglia, and so the pre-ganglionic axons will arrive into these structures and either synapse there to the post-ganglionic neurons or pass through this and end up synapsing in these other ganglions that then lead to the final effectors. These lead to the fight or flight responses that inhibit salivation, dilate the pupils so more light can come in, speed up the heart rate, increase the rate of breathing, inhibit digestive functions. So parasympathetic division, sympathetic division. These are two separate divisions that innervate all of the same structures, but they have a different effect and opposite effect. Normally, these two systems are working together all the time, so some areas are being stimulated by one, other areas by others. However, they can have a massive overwhelming of the sympathetic division when we release adrenaline, norepinephrine, from the adrenal gland. Neurotransmitters. So acetylcholine is the primary neurotransmitter for most of the ganglionic synapsing, as well as for the pre-parasympathetic postganglionic nerves. The norepinephrine and epinephrine, aka adrenaline, is what the neurotransmitter used by the postganglionic fibers of the sympathetic division. And they can be excitatory or inhibitory. Hope that was helpful.